are accused quite frequently of wanting to conserve class privilege. But I think these two terms, liberal and conservative, are very confusing. People use these words in different ways, in conflicting ways, and when they're talking with each other, they don't even know that they're using the words in different and in incompatible ways. So one way to sort this out, liberal and conservative, I think, is to consider two kinds of freedoms: personal freedoms and economic freedoms. How many people here know who David Bose is? Okay, so some of you have read David's excellent book called Libertarianism, a Primer, right? He's written many other things. He's the executive vice president at the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. And I'm taking this diagram that I'm going to build here for you. I'm taking it from his book, his primer on libertarianism. On the vertical axis, I want to measure personal freedom on a scale from 0 to 100. 100 is you're perfectly free in personal freedoms. On the horizontal axis, I want to measure economic freedom. Again, 0 to 100, where 100 is, yes, you're perfectly free. Now up here, at that point, with a 100 on the personal freedom scale and 100 on the economic freedom scale, we would have a person who says that that is my philosophy, 100 on both scales. That person would be called a pure libertarian. And David Bose is as close to a pure libertarian in this country as you will find. Okay? David's been a friend of mine for many, many years, mainly because I worked with the Cato Institute and have done for a good portion of my professional career. Now, let's consider this box, the blue box. People who would locate themselves in the blue box think very highly of personal freedom. They hold personal freedom very high on their value scale, but they don't think that economic freedom is very important at all. I claim that that is the modern liberal. High on personal freedom, low on economic freedom. They believe in freedom in the bedroom, but not freedom in the boardroom. That's a modern liberal. What about the red box? Well, the red box is characterized by a person who would hold economic freedom to be a very important value. But personal freedom, that's not such an important value. I claim that that is a modern conservative. One who believes in freedom in the boardroom. I don't mess around with my business, but I'll mess around with you and your choices in the bedroom. That's what I consider to be a modern conservative. Now in the yellow box, a person who identifies in the yellow box doesn't believe in either kind of freedom very intensely, right? I simply call these people life arrangers. They are people who think that they know better the choices that you should make in your business and in your personal life. And they really feel that if you would let them arrange your life for you, you will find happiness forever. Sound familiar? Up here in the green area, people who hold personal freedom to be fairly important and economic freedom to be fairly important, these are the libertarians. Not pure libertarians. There's a lot of room in that green box. Right? I'm in that green box. But I'm not a pure libertarian. But this isn't about what my political philosophy is. I'm just trying to sort out the words, what the words mean. Now, here's a test for you. If you got a paper and pencil, I want you to take the following two self-tests. Okay? One will be a self-test on personal freedom. One will be a self-test on economic freedom, and those who have read David Bo's book, Libertarianism a Primer, will have already seen this test, although I have changed the questions. I have come up with questions that I thought would be somewhat more useful, at least for my purposes, than some of the questions that he asked. So first, let's do a personal freedom test. Now, who should decide whether you wear a seatbelt in your car? Who should decide? Put a 10, give yourself a 10 in that blank space if you think it's up to you. Give yourself a 0 if you think the government should do it. Because remember, the scale in the Bose diagram goes from 0 to 100 on both dimensions. And if you're not sure, well, then you're in the wishy-washy middle. Give yourself a 5. Who should decide whether you own a gun? You? Give yourself a 10. 0 if you think it should be up to the government to decide whether you own a gun. And 5 if you're not sure. Okay, so you got the process here now. So let's go a little bit more quickly. Serve in the military. Who should make that decision? Smoke marijuana. Who should make that decision? Use a risky medical treatment. This is one of my favorites. Suppose your daughter is dying of cancer for which there is no known cure, but there is an experimental drug that hasn't been approved by the FDA yet. You know the FDA? The Federal Delay Administration? Who should decide whether your daughter is going to have access to that drug? You? Or the government? Or you're not sure? Travel to Cuba. You want to go to Cuba? Is that up to you? Or the government? Or you're not sure? How about the school, I'm talking about K through 12 now, the school to which you send your kid? This is the so-called school choice issue. Should you be able to decide? The government? Or you're not sure? How about the amount of water you use per flush in the toilet? Who should decide that? And who should decide how, when, where, and under what rules you should have access to the internet? Well, and my personal favorite, who should decide whether you will be represented by a union? A labor union I'm talking about, not a credit union. A labor union. All right? Add them up. Okay? Add up the scores you gave yourself. See where it comes out. Okay? Next, economic freedom. Same game, same rules, same process. Who should decide whether you are permitted to buy a foreign car or not? How you're going to, even whether, but how you are going to save for retirement? Who should decide? Who should decide whether and how much you wish to provide money to help the poor? This is another, I'm always tempted to get off on tangents, but this is another pet peeve of mine. We all know, or I think we all know, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Somebody's beaten up on the road to Jericho. A couple people pass by. Nobody does anything. Then along comes a Samaritan who simply pauses, makes his own decision, private decision, helps the person out, takes care of the wounds, puts the guy on a donkey, takes the guy to